Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Hendrik. Or maybe it's not morning for you.
No, it's not. I think I need to put on the light. It's started getting dark here. Okay, so still some people missing here from TSC, so let me ping the channels with a short reminder.
Good morning, Hiero crew.
Good morning. Hey, we are still traveling.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm
You're
back.
back.
Back to rainy Europe.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I see that's the weather that you're back in Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's December rain, cold, chopping wood.
Georgie, do you know if Stoyan will join today?
Not not sure, honestly. I can ping him.
Because we would like to do some voting maybe today, so it would be great to.
Give me a second. I will try to.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And I will start while you ping him. So welcome to the Hiero TSC meeting. That is again a full meeting after the Thanksgiving week last week. So happy to see many of you back here. As any of the meetings at the Hiero project, this is a public meeting. This means everybody is welcome to attend that meeting. Everybody is welcome to join discussion with us, ask questions, and so on. And since we do all that in a public and allow everybody, to unmute yourself and say something and ask questions and so on, we need some rules here. And this meeting, the rules that we are using is a code of conduct of the Linux Foundation and the antitrust policy of the Linux Foundation. And with that, I ask all people here to be nice to each other, be friendly, and then that's the only and most important rule here. and then feel free to join all our discussions that we have today. Which brings us to the agenda, and I've seen Brandon created already the pull request from the last meeting minute. That's the one that's not merged so far, but otherwise we are up to date, which is awesome. Thanks again, Brandon, for moving that forward. And since last week, or since 2 weeks maybe, we now have at the beginning always this question about any updates or events from the community or members that you would like to announce, to share with us, so that if you may be going to a conference, if you attend an event, if you wrote a blog post about Hiero or whatever, this is a good place to share it, because then other people will know about it and can have a look at it, maybe going to the same conference and can meet with you. And I'm seeing Diane has unmuted herself. I assume she has some great news to share. So, Diane?
Just a reminder that if you're in New York City and you're a maintainer, I'd highly encourage you to come to the maintainer days. And if you are a member, you should have gotten, your marketing team or somebody at your organization should have gotten a link to the LFDT member summit, which is in New Jersey, the 2 days following the maintainer summit. So if you haven't gotten those notices in your email boxes, the link to the maintainers day is there, and you can see who's attending. There's a few of us already committed to coming, but it would be lovely to see more of you there, and maybe have a coffee meetup of all the Hiero people over lunch. So if you're coming, please let them know so that they can make spaces. And there's a wiki there, and the 10th anniversary, there will be some great swags, and great, Michael. It'd be wonderful to have you there. So cool. That was my announcement. I don't have anything else, but if you do, and right after this call, there will be is the marketing meeting this week, I think?
No,
it's
this week is the
bi-weekly.
transition meeting, and we have one project we will bring in to Hiero, where we prepared everything the last days. The marketing meeting is next week again.
Perfect. All right, there you go. But this is really for anyone else who has, at your organization, is going somewhere and is going to be representing Hiero, any TSC members speaking, just let us know so we can help promote it.
Cool. Thanks, Diane. And yeah, I agree. Those two events are great and important to us. Any other news, anything you would like to share? Has your event, Michael, that you announced last week already happened?
Oh, no. That's a good point. Yes. So we are co-organizing an event called the Patchwork, or longer form Syncing on AI Standards. This event is being held on December 10th. It is a very cross-functional event where we will have participation from folks in the Linux Foundation, Trust over IP, Decentralized Identity Foundation, A2A, MCP, First Person Project, and so forth. ERC 8004, Marco will be speaking as well. And this is unconference/conference style virtual event that will be held December 10th, 10:30 a.m. to 3:30 EST. So the first half of it is kind of like presentations from different speakers, where they will cover all the different standards that are currently being built in the AI industry. And the second half is a more collaborative experience where we have a little bit breakout sessions and folks will just jam and see where the roads intersect. Really, it's just a moment to take a beat because there's so much happening in the AI industry today, lots of different standards. Some of them are intercepting in different ways, and it's a way for us to come together and see what is working, where can we improve, how can we coexist in this open source ecosystem.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Maybe since since we talked already about January, next to the meetings in New York and New Jersey, I plan to be at FOSDEM, which is maybe the biggest open source event in Europe. It's happening in Brussels the weekend after the member summit in New York. I even plan to submit content about Hiero, and I don't know, maybe somebody, Milan or somebody else coming from Europe is interested in joining FOSDEM, since it's an open conference. And yeah, get a Hiero coffee or whatever there. Okay. If that's it, I think that's a lot of news, so it really makes sense to do that at the beginning of the meeting. Thanks, Diane, for doing that suggestion. That works really good. Which brings us to the next point on the agenda, the hips. And last week I see Mark here. Mark, or it was Mark or Keith, said currently there was nothing for a concrete review, but some things might come in near future. So when looking at it, we have one that is marked for review and several that are defined as draft. And I think the 1313 is the one that will come to us in near future, right? Can you maybe give an update here, Mark or Keith?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
happy
I
to.
think that,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, that's still the case. I think Keith, you probably have the latest on 1313. On my side, the cutover will be the next one that will bring, but that'll probably be a few weeks from now. And then additionally, we have a few more coming related to block streams, block nodes, and I would imagine in the next 3 weeks we'll have one or two more. One just being an informational hip, but the other one dealing with block node rewards. So, yep, nothing pressing today, but Keith, I'll let you have the floor for 1313.
No, just the same thing. 1313 is probably the closest tip coming to TSC.
Okay, good. Okay, so in the last meeting last week, we had 4 project proposals that has been shown to us and presented to us. And I think we have quorum and would be able to vote today. Let me check. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 people. Oh, Alex is missing 2. Yeah. But that mean we could vote, right? So voting on a proposal should be fine. First of all, the question to all the people who are here from the TSC or in general, everybody, do you have any upcoming questions on any of those project proposals? I assume, Michael, you might have an update because we had several discussions, but for the first 3 last time, it looked like we're good to go. And there have been no additional questions on it. Are there any new questions on one of those 3 project proposals? Okay, that sounds good. So let's go through the proposals and see if we get them voted in. Let's start with the Hiero contracts repository, which is a repository containing the abstractions and utilities for smart contracts in Solidity so that you can interact with the native functionalities of an Hiero network. And let me have a look. Who do we have here? So, Michael,
I vote yes.
Brandon,
Vote yes.
Milan,
Yes.
Georgie,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
and I vote yes too. Great. So, all yes on that one. Let's go to the second one, which is the fork of the Ethereum client spec project that can be used to check if something is, compatible to the Ethereum standard, with the goal to test Hiero, especially the consensus node, I assume, against all those tests to check that we are compatible with Ethereum. Michael, how do you vote on that one?
I vote yes.
Brandon,
I vote yes.
Migan,
My vote is yes.
Georgie,
Yes.
Richard,
Yeah.
and I vote yes too. Great, thank you. So the one presented by Fur last week are all approved. So let's move to the next one. Oh, hey, Alex. Since you're just joining, we already voted. We voted on the Hiero contracts repository and the Hiero Ethereum client spec repository that are both presented last week by Fur, and we approved those two projects to become part of Hiero, just for you. And I just wanted to start the voting on the Identity Collaboration Hub, which is quite similar to the SDK Hub that we already have and should be a home for the documentation of the different DIT methods that we want to support with Hiero, and next to that containing code snippets, some smaller codes that you can use to work with DIT and so on. So Brendan, how do you vote on that one?
I will vote yes.
Michael,
I'm a yes.
Milan,
Yes.
Georgie,
Yes.
Richard,
I actually have not seen this one before, so I'm not prepared to vote today, so I will abstain.
okay, Alex,
I vote yes.
and I vote yes too. Perfect. So yeah, I think Keith is here. So Keith, go forward with that one. Good. So which brings us to Michael, to your proposal, and maybe as a follow-up from last week regarding that proposal. We said we do not have that much time on that proposal. Oh, Richard, sorry, there's
Oh,
hands up.
I'm sorry. Were you going to go to voting, or I had a couple things I wanted to talk about on this one before we voted on it? But if you,
I think, yeah.
Okay.
I believe we will not directly vote. Totally agree. So,
Okay.
we do not have much time at the end of the last meeting, and I think we have some open question. We had a discussion at the end of last meeting how this proposal works together with HIPS, and at the end it looked like we agreed on a lot of points. So Michael, my question is to you, have you like updated your presentation? Do you want to present something? What's the state here?
Yeah, I mean, I think last time we probably had to do a bit of a rush going through it just because we're covering so many project proposals right now. So I am more than happy to go through it all over again. Just some high level updates, as you mentioned. Yes, I think we're aligned on how we would do the hip side of it. But I'll just start from the beginning here. Let me make sure that I've got that. And I apologize again if somebody's already seen this from last time. I'll try to be concise here. So just starting from the beginning, what is Hashgraph Online for those who just aren't familiar yet or haven't come across us on the specification side. Hashgraph Online, we develop open source standards, and we currently have over 32 million transactions in mainnet. We create tools and services for a fully on-chain and decentralized agentic internet. Our most popular SDKs include the Standards SDK, which gets over 1,000 weekly downloads on average, and our HCS improvement proposals repository, which has the specifications that power those Standards SDKs. And these specifications include things like how do you store files on chain, for example, HCS1? How do you create a decentralized registry? How do you recurse through files? How do you have agents talking to each other, and so forth? At a wider lens, these specifications are essentially meta protocols. If you're familiar with ecosystems like ordinals on Bitcoin, or if you're familiar with things like JSON schemas, that's pretty much all HCS specs are. They're application level JSON schemas that have immutable agreed upon patterns for doing certain things like file storage and registration of data. It's built entirely on the Hedera consensus service, although it will also utilize services like the account service, using the memo field and so forth, or sometimes the HCS service in the case of standards and specifications like Hashinals, right? So it goes well with these other services and enables application level patterns that are really important for users in day-to-day things like file storage and registration and so forth. As of today, we have over 21 standards that are already built. Not all of these standards are published. Many of them are still in a draft status, which means that they're being vetted. We're seeing what works and what doesn't work. And when they are ready, then they go into a published state, which basically says we've given a rubber stamp and said that, okay, this specification makes sense. It's ready to be used in production. That's all the statuses mean, but for all intents and purposes, anyone can contribute an HCS specification, and they can have their draft merged into the repository so it can be shared and visible. So you're probably wondering, what are some examples of HCS specifications? One of our most popular ones is HCS1, which devised a clever way of storing files on graph. So let's say, for example, and you might have seen this presentation at HederaCon actually, this has been a little bit revised. Let's say you have a 4 kilobyte JPEG, and you were to take that 4 kilobyte JPEG and you were to split it into 4 little pieces. And you're probably wondering why 4 pieces. Well, if you're familiar with the consensus service and Hiero in general, you have that 1 kilobyte limit for putting data onto HCS. So we take that 4 kilobytes and break it down into 4 little pieces. We compress those pieces, and then we put them on as messages to a Hiero consensus topic. In that topic, we include a memo field, which has some information about the data that has been inscribed. And inside an application, let's say a wallet or front end, it basically pulls down those messages and then reconstructs them after decompressing them. So with every CS specification, there is a kind of JSON schema that comes along with it that is formatted and agreed upon. Generally, with these schemas, we try to keep the field names very short because we're cognizant of how little space we have in these 1 kilobyte messages. So with HCS1, we have 2 fields, O and C. O is the order, and C is the actual content that has been compressed for that message. The clever aspect of this is the O field, which allows you to, for example, let's say you have a 1 GB file, you can create 1 GB worth of chunks, and you can inscribe them or put them on the topic in parallel, meaning you can have thousands of transactions going out at the same time. So you don't have to wait for a sequential transaction approval, which would be very, very slow and tedious. And then on the application level, you simply order by the O field so that you have that final image file, and you can reconstruct it the same way. It was a week or so ago, somebody recently put out 500 megabytes of data, and it was inscribed within 6 or 8 hours or something like that, which was very cool. So our proposal to Hiero essentially is that Hashgraph Online would donate the current HCS specs, and it would place them under the Hiero umbrella in a new repository. No, we're still figuring out the name. In the GitHub, I've updated this, but not in the presentation. But we're currently thinking Hiero HOL specs, so it's less of a mouthful, while preserving continuity for the community that's aware of HOL and these standards. The governance process would follow HCS4 from draft to finish. And then what would happen is there would be a Hiero HIP, which is basically an index of all of the different HCS specifications. It could also be a new category in HIPs, as we discussed last time. So you would have one application HIP that links to all of the specifications inside of this new repository. And then you would have these sub-HIPs or sub-files that are related to it, which show, for example, you'd have an hcs1.md file that the index links to, and that would include some details about the actual standard, and it would link back into the GitHub. So there is the full process kind of looks like this. Somebody makes an HCS draft in the new repository, Hiero HOL specs. There is an initial review by the maintainers of the GitHub project, and as long as it's meeting best practices and the commits are signed properly, then they are merged as a draft. At this point, the maintainers of the HOL specs repository would do a vote and decide if they're ready to publish it or not, or they would work with whoever submitted that specification and get it to a point where we can eventually publish it. Once it's finally published, then a new HIP or a new file is created in the Hiero Improvement Proposals repository, which will be linked to the index HIP. So you have the index HIP, and then you have a list of entries to each HCS specification, and each of those could be in their own file inside of the Hiero Improvement Proposals project. So what are the benefits to Hiero from this donation? One, wider adoption. HCS specs are already used by companies and developers in the Hiero ecosystem. It's a lot of folks who are experimenting, exploring, and also building. We've got 32 million plus transactions plus wide adoption on NPM for the standards SDK today. These standards, or should probably change this to specifications, give teams a direct path from idea to production. For some of the app level examples we talked about already, registries, file storage, agent to agent communication, and so forth. Moving HCS into a vendor neutral LFDT project signals stability and long-term stewardship to enterprises and partners that are interested in exploring these specifications, but they're not 100% sure. There would be a single well-governed repository which reduce fragmentation and encourage partners to also converge on these specifications. Part of it is we never had a process for creating JSON schemas and specifications on the Hiero consensus service. And this provides that process for folks who are interested in these kinds of things. And from a stewardship perspective, by bringing the repository into Hiero, that means you get Hashgraph Online support for contributing more specifications while also functioning as maintainers, which means review, marketing, support, and PR. since we're actively developing new specifications already that will promote more adoption and markets the usage of the Hedera consensus service within Hiero through these specifications. So it would be a big win-win, I think, for the ecosystem for us to make this happen. You're probably wondering, why is this a separate project inside of Hiero, not just part of the HIP process? I think for one, there is with these specifications, they are important enough that they should fit on their own umbrellas, that they get their own awareness and drive and adoption. If you are somebody who is contributing to this and you're interested in this, it gives you a lot of incentive and alignment to contribute directly into the specifications repository as it stands on its own and gets its own attention. Within other related ecosystems, for example, with the LFDT, Trust over IP, and Hyperledger, there are multiple projects that have gone through a similar setup where instead of using one repository that has all of the improvement proposals, they will break it down like you have indie hips, non-creds, Trust over IP, and Fabric RFCs. These are all set up as different repositories, but under the same LFDT project umbrella. So that at a high level was our presentation for Hiero HOL specs. The key changes between this and last time, Hendrik, is that we would have each HCS would have its own file in Hiero as well, and that would link back to the main project.
Maybe you have a look at the chat, Michael, and for like 1 or 2 minutes, because there were already several discussions about exactly that topic. And I assume if I now ask about questions, exactly that will be asked. So please have a look, maybe for 1 minute or 2, and I think then we can go into exactly that discussion, if that works for you.
Yeah, I'm taking a look right now.
Sure.
Yeah, while you're looking through that, Michael, I mean, overall, I think this is great. I think this is better than the previous proposal that we had earlier in the year. The specifications are being done here, and then the SDKs could be done in Hiero or could be done external, and I think that's great. I think this is a good setup. My only concerns are number one, in terms of the name. I think it's important that it be vendor neutral. We did the same and are doing the same for everything that we bring in for Hedera. Even our package names, we've been changing from call them Hedera to be called Hiero or whatnot. So I'm not happy with the HOL in the name of the project, because that's not vendor neutral. So that worried me. It's a minor thing, but I think it's an important thing when we're trying to establish the vendor neutrality aspect of our project. The other thing is, I actually am not sold on the idea that we need to have a separate repo for this. What I really like is, I like the idea of having a specific set of maintainers who are voting on these standards, who are not the TSC. But obviously, like everything inside Hiero, it's under the direction of the TSC, but it's not us. So HCS standards would not come to this group for votes. There'd be a different group that does the voting. I love that idea. I love that group will be populated with HOL members, because they've earned the right to, maintain those specifications over the last, several years. So I love that idea. I think that's perfect and fair and reasonable. I just don't know. It's not like a deal breaker, like the end of the world. If I were standing on the island alone and everybody else wanted to go the other way, I could get behind it. But I like the idea of just saying, we have a HIP repo, we have all of our standards in there. We just create a new category called HCS standards. The people who vote on those are the maintainers for those standards, who would be preceded with all the HOL members. And then we just keep all of that stuff together in one place. I think that the fact that it has its own standardization process already gives it its sort of specialness without needing an extra repo. And having it be adjacent to the hips is helpful for in both directions, but just sort of in terms of raising awareness of hips in general, that it's like hip, hip, hip. And we sort of, instead of having, multiple different standards processes, we have ones, that's called the hips. And yeah, we have different groups that vote on which hips are going in or not, but it's I think to the outside world it would be straightforward. I like the idea of keeping it called HCS so that you have continuity with all the ones that HCS1 is still HCS1 after it comes to Hiero. I think that's important. However we do this, I think we should have the same naming and numbering because that's expected by everybody. And it it makes, I think it still works. It's like Pyro consensus standards. Okay, cool. It still works. Um, so those were my only thoughts on it. Otherwise, Michael, I think that this is a very workable approach that we're doing.
I think Hendrik, you should go, and then I can
Yeah.
provide some more.
Sure, sure. So I mean, I already said it last time, right? I totally agree on the naming issue that Richard mentioned, and as I said it last time, I wish to have this link between one HCS and one hip, and or to say like, oh yeah, it's done as an hip. Where I would say having a repo could make sense is like we did it now with the identity topic where Keith said, look, we want to write the documentation and present it in a way that is a little bit different than in HIP. It should, feel different. And if you say, look, we have our way to have the documentation and we want to document it in our format and render it on a specific page in our way, I think that is something. I mean, we discussed it at HIPS, at the identity projects. Similar here, we can discuss that, right? But it's important that it all starts with an HIP, and if the HIP is approved by whoever the group is, which don't need to be the TSC for identity methods, we have said it shouldn't come to the TSC. I see it here too. So my point of view is create a new hip type. Once that hip is approved, put it as a nice documentation in your way into that repo would be fine to me.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the feedback. I think for the name, I think we're pretty amendable. I think that the name is a bit of a mouthful. I understand the vendor neutrality argument, and we're also flirting with the idea of Hyro consensus specs and a few other names that we can rally around. I don't think the name will be a big issue, and that's not a hill that we want to die on as far as it goes. But I do think that this project should be its own repository. It should keep its own initial process. And I think the HIP is the end state. For us, a large part of this is one, the continuity. Hashgraph Online, if we were saying this like 2-3 years ago, it would be very different. But today we have a lot of traction. A lot of folks are using our standards or talking to partners, larger companies as well, who are adopting the HCS specifications. And because of that, I think there is a huge mandate, not just from folks who are working with us, but also the DAO members of Hashgraph Online, that this remain its own project inside of Pyro, its own repository. And the process follows HCS4 from draft to publish. Once it's finally published, then what we're saying is, okay, now we have this ratification index inside of Pyro improvement proposals that includes all of the specifications. Plus, if anyone else wants to create specifications, they can do so either in their own project or within the HIP process themselves if they really want to. And then they can link through the canonical hash using the application HIP process. In the ratification index, you have a list of entries that all link to like HCS1, for example, and that could be its own file that includes the version history and some other important meta details. And again, if somebody wanted to include the entire specification by doing that, they could also do that as well. That's an option for them. But I think for the continuity of the work that's already been done, it's really important that this remains its own project. And from also the marketing and PR perspective, this being its own project drives a lot of attention because we're working with folks like the Advanced AI Society and IEEE, and they're hearing about HCS 14 and these other specifications standalone. As far as the AI industry is concerned, there are already some worries about tying AI related standards, for example, too tightly with ledger backed standards like Web3 and Hedera. And even though Hiero is quite neutral, creating this additional project provides a little bit more space where we can say that this is a little bit more neutral from the actual ledger itself. And it brings people into Hiero who are contributing to HCS standards who really are more interested in things like the AI side or maybe decentralized registration and so forth. So I think there is a strong argument for keeping this as a separate project. The name, I think, is something that we can absolutely work on and figure out. But that is something that keeping this entirely within the HIP process will be very difficult for us to land on. Any thoughts?
Hey, Michael. This is Alex. Just a couple thoughts. One is, as I believe you said, that the HIP would be the final work product of an agreed upon approved HCS spec or standard.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So there would be a
That
ratification index.
yeah. So I mean, you have the development. I'm just trying to think this through real time. That because you have the voting of that membership that as in the discussion you just had with Richard of the Hashgraph online members to get to following your HCS4 processes, that is the ultimately what is contributed to become a informational application, whatever HIP, into Hedera and I guess Hedera, I mean, sorry, Hiero, but I guess maybe there needs to be just some modification of HCS4 to reflect the interrelationship between what is approved in HCS and what is ultimately published either by reference directly, etc., as a Hiero HIP. But otherwise, I agree that having this in its own repo makes sense because it keeps the governance clean as to who's actually approving or voting on these standards via the maintainers there. But it can easily still link into HIPs as long as it's reflected as such in HCS4.
Exactly. Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
I couldn't find the hand raiser
Sure,
thing.
no problem.
Sorry.
You're unmuted, so go forward.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of simple. My brain just can't really into too many complicated things. And it seems like this is just another standard at the end of the day. And we could foreseeably just allow it to fall under informational HIPs and title it with a certain prefix like HCS1 and then the title and the working group could be Hashgraph Online. However, that group comes to a consensus on what that standard should be, that is like outside of the HIPS process. And it seems like that's just, that's how that working group comes to the consensus of those type of informational HIPs. and it would limit confusion around what standard falls under an informational HIP versus an HTS HIP. Or for instance, like we've had informational HIP in the past relating to NFT metadata for HTS, and that was a community HIP. Do we make a new type of HIP for that called HTS specs? I mean, it seems like it would just be most simple to keep it under informational specs. That's just my thoughts.
Alex, then Hendrik, and then I'll provide feedback.
Alex, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I don't disagree with you on that. I don't think that there needs to be a special HIP type for this. I think it can be either information or application HIP, depending on the nature of what's in there. So we don't need to expand that. But I think, Michael, as you're highlighting, having all the workings getting to the point where it is submitted is contained outside of some of the other HIP activities. And I think the repo does that. And it provides a mechanism for additional support and communication around implementation, maybe conformance testing, or other things with regards to the utilization of those particular HIPs. So just my 2 cents.
Thanks, Alex.
You want to pause, or should I go? Up to you, Michael.
Oh, you can go, and then I'll.
Okay, so I have 2 points. I assume several people have already seen it, but in the chat there was a discussion about possible namings, and it looks like one idea is to just call it Hiero consensus specs as a repo under Hiero Ledger. I assume that could make sense. And the other point is when coming to HIP. So what you are doing today, Mike, in the Hashgraph online side is you draft a spec, discuss it, and once it's done, you mark it as final, and it's there, right? So, and it's there in your nice style, looking great on the web page and all that. And would it be possible to say like the draft happens as an HIP, and once it's approved by the Hashgraph Online people, a PR is created to the documentation, to the Hiero Consensus Specs repo, containing the full documentation, so that this repo don't contain specs that are in draft mode, but only the documentation of the final specs. Just as, one idea I have in mind.
No, I think the short answer is I don't think that would work. The longer answer is that the goal with the HIP side is that it serves as a ratification index. So you have this application or informational HIP, whichever we decide, which has essentially a list of entries that link to different specifications that we've approved. And those specifications can either live in Hiero HOL specs, or maybe they live inside of a separate informational HIP or something like that, if somebody wants to submit it outside of that process. And then each of those entries have their own file inside of the Hiero improvement proposals, which just shows the version history, the date, and where you can find the commit SHA of the actual specification. But it's really important to us that the work process from draft to publish is contained in the Hiero, I think consensus specs is what we're leaning into right now as a name. And then once it is published, then we add the new ratification into the HIP process that links back to it. So this way you still get the best of both worlds, where inside the HIP process, you're formalizing this and you're recognizing it. And if we really want to, we can do a TSC vote on ratifications to this index. Again, it's optional step. I'm not sure that it's necessary, but most of the work product would probably happen in this separate repository. As far as separating the repo, again, I also want to state how important it is that it's a separate neutral repository inside of Hiero. Um, just because the folks that we're talking to today already have some concerns that it's maybe too focused on Hedera as far as neutral AI standards go. And if we can break it out a little bit, it invites more participation from the wider industry, from folks like who are in like the Advanced AI Society and IEEE and all these organizations that are really interested in specifications that we're creating, like HCS 14, for finding and recognizing agent IDs across any registry and communication protocol on the planet. But there has to be some compromise there so that we can meet these folks in the middle. I think this is a good way of doing it, where it's still in the LFDT as a neutral project. You have a separation from the higher improvement proposals, at least at some degree. So they're not thinking, okay, this is only for the ledger, because these are specifications that you can theoretically implement outside of Hiero if you wanted to, because they're basically just JSON schemas. And that invites folks from these other ecosystems to go and participate and eventually grow the maintainers group and create more and more of a feedback loop where people are interested in contributing while still providing that inroad to the HIP process for the TSC. And there have been many cases of this throughout LFDT's history too at other projects. I mentioned it here in the slide deck. For example, with Hyperledger and AnonCreds, Indie HIPs, and Fabric RFCs, these are basically separate specifications that live in the same LFDT project, but they have their own process, right? We work with a partner, we've spoken with a partner, First Person Project, Drummond Reed. He's part of the Trust over IP, and his specifications are within that realm as well. So this is not something that is new to the LFDT ecosystem from what I can see, and it's been done before, and there's good reasons to do it, and that's what we're pitching here.
So I see Richard has hands up. Richard, give me just 1 second, because looking at the time, I see we won't finish today anyway. But I will give Richard, he can say his thoughts. And Michael, would it be okay for you, because we have another point on the agenda, if we continue the discussion, which from my point of view is a good discussion, and we're moving forward next week?
Yes, absolutely. We can continue
Perfect.
next week. Again,
Okay.
thank you all for hearing us out and spending the time, all of your great questions and feedback.
So Richard.
Yeah, I think it's worth thinking about this a little bit more. However, if what people want is something that's not directly tied to Hedera, by extension, Hiero, then maybe hosting the standards repo in Hiero isn't right. It should be hosted at the LFDT level, one step higher than us, and then we just ratify them in a HIP. Maybe that would be a more appropriate way to do it if you're trying to get ledger neutrality, if you will. Because anything that we put in Hiero, by our charter, Hiero exists to support Hedera. So if we put it into Hiero, then it is sort of tied to Hedera, and maybe that's not what you want.
I think it's somewhere in the middle of that. I think definitely let's explore it a little bit more. One of the options we were looking at before is like an LFDT lab. But I think it would be a huge win if we can bring this into Hiero and market this and publicize it in that really cohesive and concise way, where you have that separation, but you also have all of these new contributors coming into the Hiero ecosystem.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I would love to have all those contributors and everybody. It just maybe this is why the proposal doesn't make sense to me. If it's part of Hiero, it makes sense to be part of the HIP process. I don't see anything fundamentally better about having a separate repo for the standardization process. It's just sort of fracturing our standardization process, which doesn't really make sense to me. But if the goal is that they don't want, you're working with people who don't want to be tied to Hedera, they want to be able to use the HCS standards on, say, smart contracts emitting logs on Ethereum in the same format and stuff. If that's what they want, then I think LFDT would probably be a better home than than Hiero. Just like, what is this thing that we're trying to do? I don't see how somebody would object to us using the HIP process, but they would be fine using a repo inside of Hiero. That doesn't make sense to me. And I think maybe what you're trying to do is to split the difference between two competing concerns and try to find a compromise. I just don't know that that's a good move, and that it just muddies things, I think. So it may be the LFDT is your better friend for this, and then we just do standardization. And I'm saying that as somebody who would rather that the answer was, oh yes, these are Hedera standards, Hiero standards that are meant to support and strengthen the Hedera network, and we would love to have all those contributors. That's why I want everybody, I would love to have all those contributors from Hashgraph Online participating in our repos and our processes and stuff like that, because it grows Hiero. That's what I would like the answer to be. But if what you're saying is that your contributors expressly do not want to be too associated with Hedera and by extension Hiero, then maybe LFDT is actually what you need to do.
I think it's a few things, right? It's you want that vendor neutrality.
We're running out of time. I think it moves into a good direction, but we have 2 minutes or 3 minutes left, and we cannot solve that. But maybe I have one question to you. Hiero consensus specs, would that be, if it stays at Hiero, a repository name that could work?
As far as the name goes, I'm comfortable as myself, as also as a voting member of Hashgraph Online with that name, but we would still need to vote within Hashgraph Online to that name.
That is totally fine, but that means we make progress, and you could now take that name as an idea, get it to Hashgraph Online, and maybe next week we know the name is good. We all agreed on the name. The only thing we need is the standardization workflow, and I assume we will find a good solution on that too. So we will continue with that topic next time, and I think we will not really solve or discuss the last topic, which is on the list fully, but I can already give a kind of sneak peek what happened, because Jessica did an awesome job. We discussed a lot in the community meetings about how we want to document meetings. We have SDK meetings, we now have Blocknode meetings, we have marketing meetings, and for all those we want to create agendas, we want to store minutes, and so on. And instead of doing it in each repo, Jessica created in the governance repo a wiki by using the GitHub wiki functionality, where you see it here on the right. Now, for a lot of different communities, like the general community codes, the identity community codes, the marketing codes, SDK community codes, solo codes, website codes, and so on, you now find entrance here where you get an overview about the agenda. Some of them have the minutes AI based, what is happening here? Come on. Oh yeah, here we go. AI based, but we now have a central place for all the agendas and minutes, excluding the one from the TSC. So that's definitely something we should talk about if we move our TSC minutes and agendas to that one too, because this looks like a really good place, to get the Hiero community together with links to all the meetings, with links to the calendar, and with all the agendas. And I think Jessica will present that more deeply next week, and I would like to then discuss if we move our agenda to that wiki too. I will put it again on the agenda for next week, and with that, we're exactly on time, and yeah, a lot of things to discuss next week. Thank you all for being here, and thanks for the very constructive discussion, and see you all next week. Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.